Welcome to Corporate Bytes. I'm Rich Bowers as always, and today we have Charles Dunn back with us. Good afternoon, Charles Dunn. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, happy to have you in here. And I couldn't think of a better expert for today's discussion on product engineering. But before I do, it's always so impressive. Every single time you come on here, I feel like we're adding another accolade to your arsenal or resume. So
Thank you.
before we were talking about AWS certification, recently you got a ServiceNow certification, and even more recently, you got a GCP, a Google Cloud Platform certification. So congratulations.
Thank you very much, Rich. Thank you for the opportunity, Rich.
I will tell you, it's exciting to have all your insights from all these different directions, especially when we're talking about product today. And something that you've done in the past is you actually participated in product school and received a certification through them, have
Hmm.
helped build out a lot of different product engineering courses, worked with a variety of different product managers and engineers. And so who else could we want on here to talk about this? And that leads us right to our first question. Who else can tell us better than you can? How do you define product engineering?
Well, if you were to look up product engineering, like what is the definition of product engineering, it would be that product engineering is the process of innovating, designing, developing, testing, and deploying a software product. But the idea of product engineering is that a company is trying to maximize the value they get out of a product over its entire life cycle. Product engineering is a broader focus on the design of a product to meet an end user's goals and expectations.
Very succinct. So when you're talking about the process piece, it almost sounds like the term life cycle, especially in the software side of things.
Mhm.
And so it is a life cycle of products. It doesn't necessarily have to be software, but when we're talking about engineer, that's
Yeah.
typically what it falls into,
Mhm.
that meet the customer needs and achieve their goals.
Correct. And so my perspective on this, I am a software developer. I come from a software development background. I have, as you said, I've gone to product school. I've gotten that certification. I have worked with product managers, but my perspective on this is primarily from a developer perspective. So, when I construct my lessons, when I construct the curriculum for a product engineering course, it is many times it is for pro, developer students who are going to be developers themselves, and so they have to understand product management, product engineering. I'm going to say that wrong several times. So I apologize in advance, but product engineering as from the larger perspective as viewed from their role in it. And one thing to keep in mind is as a software developer, I'm very familiar with the software development lifecycle and the continuous integration, continuous deployment things. And product engineering ties very strongly into that mindset where a product is developed, iterated on, and improved. And the product engineering mindset is, what should that improvement stage be? Does that make is that
That that's perfect. No, and
yeah.
that's good to get that type of definition because it does somewhat change, at least to start, from the viewpoint of whoever's sharing or working with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
As you have different cross-functional teams can be working in the product
Mm-hmm.
space, right? And by the way, we are going to talk about product engineering mindset a little bit more here because that does play a key part, even
Mm-hmm.
obviously on the engineering on the development side. Now, as you mentioned that you've built content with for a variety of different students, a lot of them coming
Mhm,
from STEM degrees or maybe even changing their careers or
mhm.
growing, right? A lot of times people go into these type of courses to take a next step in their career after doing something else for a handful of years. So when you're putting this curriculum together, you're working with students. I'm sure you get this question. What are some core principles of product engineering? And then how does it differ from traditional, let's say, software engineering?
So traditional software engineering is the idea of hitting hitting benchmarks or hitting key performance indicators is another is another term that gets used. Um, a software engineer is given a they're given an end goal. They're given a concrete end goal of make a application, make a program, make a service that does X, Y, and Z. And these are the things that this software product has to do. And the software engineer is focused on that. They are specialized in, they understand the programming language they're working with, they understand the tech stack they're working with, they understand the technical limitations and technical possibilities of the tools they are working with. This is I'm not trying to diminish the role of a traditional engineer. I'm not trying to downplay anything that they do. They are exceptionally important for achieving those goals. But the product engineer is more involved in a bigger picture, a larger perspective on the business, on the market, on the ecosystem. So once a software engineer has built a product that does X, Y, and Z, the product engineer was involved with defining what X, Y, and Z had to be in order to fill a market need, serve the needs of the end users, improve on an existing product, and so on.
Awesome. So when you're talking about an engineer, you mentioned these benchmarks that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I love the way that you said an ecosystem. It's funny when I've talked to a handful of product trainers or instructors, they use that ecosystem, or some of them even say the product universe,
Mm-hmm.
because it does encompass so much. So I have two questions, but I just also want to confirm when we're talking about a product engineer, they have to, as you mentioned, be aware of kind of everything that goes along, including maybe external market factors, right?
Yes.
But a focus on the user's perspective, where they're gathering the feedback on either a product that already exists or one that is being created.
Yes.
They're ensuring that solution, whatever the end result, matches up with the user's goals, as you mentioned before.
Mm-hmm.
So
Correct.
then my next question to you is when I'm thinking about this definition, my first thought is, are the product engineers also building and hitting these benchmarks of a typical software engineer, or are we looking at two different complete people?
I would so now I don't want to make generalizations.
Of course. Yeah.
I don't want to say that there's never an instance where the product engineer is also a developer, is also a software engineer. I'm sure that there are many teams that are maybe leaner that have kind of these combined roles. There might be smaller companies that just have where more people have to fill in more roles. But I would say that these two disciplines are distinct. You can have a person who is theoretically a part of both, but they are two separate domains. The software engineer needs to understand the hardware, the software, the ecosystem, as you said. The product engineer has to understand the market, the end users, and the company and what the software engineer has a close focus, the product engineer has a wider focus, and there's two separate thought processes. Could be the same person.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And we've seen both, right? I know you and I discussed about this too, where you have some teams that are separate, and then you have software engineers who go through this type of, say, training even to grow those skills or enhance those skills. So really interesting. Thank you for clarifying that. Now, diving into product engineering, there's also a lot of various terms that pop up a lot, and you see just right there every single time you deal with them. And one of them is, it's called MVP. But we're not talking about most valuable player, though this type of role certainly is valuable. But minimal variable product. And maybe you want to discuss some other terms, customer journey mapping or whatever it may be. But for MVP, minimal variable product, that seems to be one that's very popular in this space. Can you tell me what that means and why is that an important piece?
So the minimum, so when you achieve, let me take a step back from my perspective, the developer perspective. When you have achieved MVP, you have a shippable product. You have a product that can be brought to market, whether that market is being sold directly to customers, being used by a team. So when we say product, maybe your mind immediately goes to something on a storefront, or being sold to a client. It also this same process applies to internal use software, for example. So a minimum variable product is one that can be deployed to the end users. It does what it needs to do. But this is where you kind of tie into the continuous deployment loop, the continuous software deployment, where once an MVP has been deployed, once it's been used, this is where you start gathering feedback. This is where you start gathering how is this product being used? What are customers saying about it? What changes need to be made to meet our end goals? And that goes back into the iterative phase. You're no longer deploying a product. You're no longer innovating a product. You are iterating on a product. And the product engineer role is to control that iteration. What changes are made to the next phase of the product? It's no longer the minimum. It is now the next. It's now the next step with improvements, bug fixes, more features, things like that.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, and as we're more so audio here, Charlie's doing a circular movement with his hand.
Yes.
As in case you're unfamiliar with, say, for instance, the software development lifecycle.
Oh yeah, that's true. I am kind of making a gesture. I'm making a circle gesture.
There we go. That fits in perfectly, because especially with product engineering, you are constantly making these changes, right? Based off of feedback, based off of market shifts. So when you're talking about MVP, just to hit on that, just for clarification, and I thank you for stating how this can also be an internal application or product, not just one that's on the shelves. I think for maybe the case of our discussion here, let's just paint a quick scenario of one on the shelf.
Okay.
Let's say that a lot of us play video games, right? A video game is released. Is an MVP kind of like that first video game release, and then the patches or the updates come on? Is that what I'm looking at? Or is it more of a skeleton of a prototype?
So now, I'm going to make a reference here that
Uh,
maybe maybe there are some gamers in the audience. There might be.
I'm sure there are. Yeah.
But but let me explain the concept of early access. So early access. When a video game is released, traditionally a video game is internally tested by the company that's developing it, or single person that's developing it and their friends. Um, uh,
So you
uh,
go. Yeah.
yeah, there you go.
Mhm.
But yeah, so let's generalize. Let's say the development team and tests, iterates, adds features to the game, and then the game is released. If the game is popular, they can continue developing content and sell more content for the game after it has been released. The concept of early access, it was popularized on the largest PC games distribution platform, Steam, where they have this feature where developers can release very early versions of their game for sale, and the people who purchase it at this stage are giving feedback that is added to the development process. So a minimum and that I think that is a good analogy for what we're talking about with MVP, where MVP is the product, is the version of a product that can attract early adopters. That's that's a key thing here, where people who look at your game in its early access state and see that has potential. I want to be involved with the direction of that. Whereas, if we're with it, when you're releasing kind of an MVP product, early adopters will use its features and then give feedback on the next iteration of that product.
I love that example as we all thought about different games that we got in the beta stage or
Yeah.
pre-release.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was such a great analogy that you walked us through there, because it really paints a picture of a product engineer, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not just developing things, but you mentioned consumer adoption.
Yes.
Consumer adoption. Are they picking this up? Are there certain things that they are maybe hooked onto, even at
Mm.
different stages, right? And that's something that we may talk about later with the hook model
Mm.
in this area. But before we dive too much down on probably the mindset pieces, this role of product engineering, product management, whatever it may be, product. Why do you feel this role is? I feel like it's increasing in popularity. Coming into the industry, oh man, almost 14 years ago now. This wasn't something that I saw as prominent, but now you look at a variety of different companies out there or job boards, whatever it may be, and you see this position. Why do you think this popularity has grown?
So, just again from my perspective, I I think it comes down to kind of there's two kind of branches that I believe kind of led to this mindset. The first is, if as I said, I'm a developer. I am very familiar with agile methodology. Agile methodology came about in as a response to rigid software development practices. So they said that the waterfall model of product development, where you just design everything in stages and every stage has to be complete before the next one can continue, is simply not the best for software. Where we can where waterfall is great for designing physical products, but but for software we can do it so much more. We can take advantage of developing software in a way that physical product development doesn't allow for. So agile methodology also came to a lot of similar conclusions that product engineering does. You need to be developing for the end user. You're not developing for the process. You're developing a product for the people who are going to use it. And so you need to have that larger perspective. And the other kind of branch of thought process is simply a matter of scale, simply a matter of scope. A lot of tech companies, a lot of companies that have to be heavily involved with technology are simply massive, with massive products that, like, a single product that one of these companies releases could involve the interconnection of hundreds of systems. And you need people who understand each of those systems individually. And as they get more complicated, the number of teams that they need to have in order to keep those systems working, you gotta have someone or some team that is looking at the big picture. So with scale, you need specialization. And I think that as these companies have gotten big, you need kind of someone between the C-suite making the overall decisions and the engineers who understand what the hardware is doing. So it's just a matter of scale of companies at a certain level.
I mean, that makes a complete sense. It's something where that piece has everything smooth, right? Where you go through, you mentioned waterfall, and obviously some companies use waterfall or a hybrid approach, even with product engineering. But when you're going through that, traditionally you're keep running right until it's done. Where the agile approach is, hey, let's do kind of an iterative process. And you've mentioned that a handful of times with the product over here. So I think your response there segues perfectly into the next question that I have for you. And we can kind of blend them a little bit. Is this type of role being able to have the visibility almost at that level of the C-suite or the end user or whatever a stakeholder identified that is needed for this product? There is this term called product engineering mindset, and you hinted at it a little bit earlier. Even though you mentioned from a development standpoint or developer standpoint or instructor standpoint, today is where you're speaking from. What is product engineering mindset to you?
So the product engineering mindset is like I said, related to the original goals of Agile. What are we developing for? You are not developing with specific tools. You are not developing with a given tech stack. You're developing a product that end users need to like, for lack of a better word. You have to understand the ways that the product will be used. You have to understand feedback and how to interpret feedback on a product in order to understand the overall goal of that product. So how are people using it? What are they saying about it? What does that really mean? That's kind of the mindset there.
And that's a wonderful approach. I know when we were talking about product mindset in some content that was built in courses, that first step, and maybe we'll talk about a handful of quick traits here too. But that first step is really understanding that end user's pain point, right? Understanding what are they looking to achieve? What are the issues right now? Where are they hurting, right? In terms of this product, and really seeing that. It could be they're not getting that little piece that is additionally needed. They need that additional feedback, or it could be the market is diluted and they need to have pieces that are more unique. Same if you're a product engineer in the product space, points of parity or points of differentiation are two key areas there. And then what you have to do is have this mindset as you're able to dive in there, almost kind of like a sales piece, right? Find the pain points.
Yes,
Then
that's
you're
true.
providing a solution. So now you're thinking in the bigger picture, the product to market, the product monetization, and you're kind of thinking about, okay, how can I provide a solution that hits all these things? While, as you definitely mentioned, that feedback is huge, right? Because this is a user-centric approach. You almost have to take a back seat as a project engineer and say, hey, look, I got to see what you want, right?
Yes.
And then one of my favorite pieces, and I know I actually sat in your course one time and you mentioned this, was this product engineering mindset reduces friction, I think was the term that you mentioned. And
Yeah.
right. I know that's one of your popular ones. And when you hear that word reducing friction, you think about, okay, well, what does that mean? And that's the typical engineering approach versus the typical business approach. Sometimes I know both parties, if you're listening, sometimes you butt heads a little bit. Type of role or mindset reduces that friction and really creates almost a business strategy and technical balance. And that's how I look at product engineering mindset. Does that sound about right based on what you just shared?
Yeah, yes, yes. It is getting the technical side to a point. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, everyone. It is getting the business, it is getting the technical side to achieve the business goals, and the business goals to be modified with available technology and available technical capabilities. So you have to understand, what do people need and what can we do? And you have to see that balance. Yeah.
And by the way, just again, kind of behind the curtain here, as Charlie says, the business to know what technical capabilities are, there's a smirk on his face as I'm sure you've gotten some questions even from me, and you're like, that's not possible yet, maybe in 10 years. So okay, cool. So when you're looking at it, is it more of a mindset shift for engineers, or could it be non-technical? You answer the question. Yes, it can be from both sides. So if someone is looking to focus and go into a product role, off the top of your head, are there any traits that they usually possess? And we kind of talked about a few throughout today: user-centric thinking, business strategy, and technical balance. But are there any traits that pop out to you that says, you know what, this person can fit into this role?
I do think it is a little bit more it is a little bit more business, but it is more technical than tradition than like a lot of business roles. There is it you do have to a product mindset has to come from the perspective of a human being using a product. So the pure technical, so a technical, so tech, either technical and business people have to like you do like both are you can definitely learn product engineering from either perspective. Um and it's just the like I said, business has to understand technical capabilities. And I know there's we're joking about no, that's not possible, but you also have to understand what is possible. You also have to understand new technologies that open up new abilities, new technical capabilities, and how those things can be used. Like technical people, like sometimes not even like engineers, but like people from like the science perspective are very good at saying, hey, here's this thing that can be done. And then once that exists in the world, an engineer's going to say, okay, how can we control that? But a business person has to say, how can people use that? So the technical piece is very important, but you also need the humanist approach. is maybe a way to say it. And one thing, just kind of a side note, I feel as though this is the best place to mention it. You need you need a certain degree of humility. You need a certain degree of humility. Once again, coming from from kind of a game development perspective, you've been sitting there, you've been working on a prototype of a game for maybe months of your life. You put it in front of players and they don't get it and they hate it. It doesn't matter how much effort you put into it. You are wrong in that case. So you can come up with the most beautiful, most perfect product you've ever thought of. And if people don't get it and they don't like it, you're wrong and you have to change.
That's so interesting because you don't think about that humility with this type of role, but you're so right. It's the feedback. You're getting constant feedback, and you have to go back to the drawing board.
Mm-hmm.
And another, there were two pieces that always stuck out with me. And the first one, I'll piggyback off of what you just said, is with that humility, you also have to have these really strong problem solving abilities, this critical thinking, right?
Yes.
And so if you do dive in deeper to product, you're going to run into different frameworks that are there. And using that video game reference, from your perspective of building this out or releasing it, I think it's wonderful. It's beautiful. All this stuff. There's even a problem solving technique called the 6 thinking hats.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And it is looking at things from at least 6 different perspectives. So you have to have that humbleness, humility to say, hey, look, it's not just from my perspective. Let me look at it from an emotional perspective. If you're someone who's really analytical, as an example. So I thought that was cool. And then one that I kept seeing in individuals that came through our programs or instructors is this founder or like ownership mentality. I think it kind of combines everything that you just mentioned. You have to really own the product with the customer.
Yes.
You have to be aware of all of these different factors and be studious, right? And analyze all that data that just keeps coming in. Because if you aren't taking that kind of product founder mentality, then there isn't as much value that you're adding to the customer except just doing only what they're asking, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely one of those. So, okay, cool. So jumping over here then, now that we have we have product engineering defined, we have product mindset defined. Jumping back to you, since you've been part of conducting and building out trainings on product engineering, what key topics or skills, and it may be something you kind of mentioned, right? Do you find participants often struggle when they are adapting from maybe a software engineer role to a product-centric role? Where do you think the initial struggles typically are?
So once again, I want to reiterate my perspective comes from very technical. I teach technical people. The struggle of going from technical to product is in a technical role, you are very used to looking at a problem from the perspective of available tools. You're going to say, here is what needs to be built and what does it need to be, what do we have available to build it in? What is the programming language? What is the database? What is the UML diagram? What classes and objects or functions, if you're what are the steps that I need to take? What are the instructions you are giving me to build, and in what? And shifting the focus from how does it need to be built to does it need to be built is something that because a lot of technical training, especially for newer people, is from that kind of education of, here is your assignment is to use I already used XYZ. ABC technology. Like we've been studying A, we've been studying B, we've been studying C. Now put them together, build something. Whereas the product mindset is the customer needs to use this. The customer needs to be able to do this, look at all of the available tools and pick the best one. And now it's not, I will say it is not a wrong choice to pick a tool that you are the most comfortable with, because you are probably that's probably the one that you're going to build the best product in anyway. But you do have to understand that you are end goal focused, not process focused. So, and I think that from going from technical to product, that's the mindset shift that you need to have.
That makes even more sense right now, because when I'm looking at the curriculum build outs that you build, it seems like you focus a lot on customer journey mapping, and we kind of mentioned that before, right?
Yes.
And just for a quick overview, customer journey mapping aids in reducing that friction that we just talked about, and helps a product engineer gain insights into those customer pain points. So it hits on that mindset. And as you're mentioning, kind of the different thought process in processes during your sessions when you're going through customer journey mapping, I know there's a visualization of steps, there's touch points and interactions that a customer goes through while engaging with this product, and you have the participants walk through that.
Yes.
And
yes,
that falls into the reason why you just gave that example, right?
And yes, because we go through that process, and but because what we're doing is primarily technical training for a lot of these technical students, when we walk through the other parts of the product mindset, of the product development, a lot of that is still academic. A lot of that is, okay, here is what we do, and then here's the technical stuff. This is 90% of what you're going to be focusing on. So it is the technical, we have to remind them that this is the big picture that we're working with. Rather, even though we are here to train them, technically, we are here to train them on technologies, but we do have to keep the larger picture, the larger product picture in mind while they are learning these specific technologies.
And so that section would typically walk people through the real world applications, right, of it and utilizing it. So that makes sense. So anybody looking to get into a product role or take that next steps, look into customer journey mapping to start. See how you fit into it. So Charles, I know I've been stealing you, and I always do. So I'm going to give you one last kind of two-parter question. With all these emerging trends, right, in technology, there's so many every single day, and obviously probably hinting at AI. What emerging trends, and maybe it is AI, do you see influencing this field of product engineering in the coming years? I'm asking you to kind of look into your crystal ball, but there you go. What do you think will play the biggest impact in this type of role or spot?
So I can read between the lines. You are talking about artificial intelligence here.
What?
And so the biggest impact, well, it's almost impossible to predict what the biggest impact is going to be, because but I would say that in terms of product specifically, the scale at which one can process feedback is about to grow exponentially, with customer feedback being so crucial to product engineering. The traditional kinds of ways of gathering feedback from customers have skewed towards sample sizes that human beings can process. Sample sizes of like A/B testing any of these kinds of like techniques where, okay, get some customers, get some potential customers. How do they use it? Beta testers, how do they use it? Rolling out features to small subsets of users. The scope and scale at which feedback can be sentiment can be analyzed and feedback can be gathered is going to be so much bigger thanks to machines that can process sentiment, process natural language. So it just from like the immediate impact on products specifically, being able to understand how your product is being used and analyze that for millions of users in real time is going to be a massive game changer for how products can be iterated on.
Man, I think you are so spot on. I think the speed of data that we're receiving now, or even a few months ago, is going to be probably nothing compared to what we're going to see.
Mhm.
And for a product engineer, product manager, someone in product, you're going to be looking at data on customer behaviors, price sensitivity, brand loyalty, adoption that you just mentioned,
Mhm.
retention and churn, and abandonment even. And then you're
Yes.
going to be taking all that data. And one of the big goals with products is to get the people hooked and continuously using it. Either one that you sell, as we're talking about video games and burning our hours into it,
Yeah.
or an internal tool where, it's going to be more efficient and there's a reason for it. And so that data is going to take this type of role to the next level, but you have to be able to digest it, right? And you're saying that
Yes.
AI or whatever it may be is going to be able to take those samples and into digestible fashion where we can make, I guess, responses, changes, whatever it may be, fairly instantly and more accurately.
Yes. So, for example, if you put out I'm just imagining a scenario where if a product has like 10 million users and you ask every single one of them to give feedback on their product, you don't have to read 10 million responses. You can have a language model read those 10 million responses, organize it by sentiment, bucket them by sentiment, classify them by sentiment, find keywords that people are using, and have the machine spit out a dashboard with all of that in minutes, maybe even less.
And when you're even talking about responses, I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole as we do off audio.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Is when you're talking about responses, you're not even talking about the users' reviews. This type of data is just you can get this type of responses and data just from seeing how they interact with the product.
That too, yes.
Right, mind-boggling.
Full confession, I was actually taking reviews, but you are also correct.
It's mind-boggling. And Charles, we're going to leave it at that before we keep on, chasing Alice down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Overall, everything that you just shared is awesome. It's incredible. You could see why you're Mr. Certification himself. And I don't know about you, but I'm interested more in product engineering. So I might go dive into some more of it after everything we learned today. But Mr. Dunn, as always, I always appreciate your time and your insights and knowledge. And thanks for being here today.
Happy to be here, as always, Rich.
And for Rich Bowers, this is Corporate Bytes. Take care, everybody.